It looks like we've got a pretty good quorum, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off. By way of introductions, let me first start by introducing myself, and then we'll go on to our co-presenters for the day here. So my name is Joe Stocker, and I am the CEO and founder of Patriot Consulting. We're a Microsoft cybersecurity firm in the United States, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Patriot in a minute, but first let's actually hear from Matt and TJ from Microsoft.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So hello, everyone. Good to meet you. So Matt Soseman, I'm a security architect on our one commercial partner team, which is now Global Partner Solutions, but I work with our Microsoft partners like Patriot to help them take our security products and compliance and identity products out to our joint customers to help all of you be successful. So really excited to be here and been looking forward to this webinar for a while. So Joe, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Matt. TJ.
Yeah, I'm TJ Fiske. I've been here at Microsoft for the past 5 years, focused on our security offerings as they've expanded. And insider risk is a newer area for us. And before coming to Microsoft, I worked as a customer, and this kind of insight into insider risk is something we would have just dreamed of back then. So glad to present it and get visibility to this capability.
Today, we're going to really be talking about, what is insider risk management? Matt's going to lead that conversation. TJ is going to give us a live demo. I'll tell a quick story. We'll have some Q&A. So with Matt, I'm going to hand it over to Matt Soseman here. He's going to explain what is insider risk management, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. This is a pretty cool topic. It's really interesting. As a security person, when I hear insider risk management, I hear, we've got bad guys in the environment, and how do we identify it? However, there's other definitions. And as you kind of look over on the left side, I mean, obviously there's a broad range of insider threats, but really what really comes to mind, I think what we're all looking to kind of achieve here is those employees, right? Whether they're on purpose trying to take data with them or leak data, or they're doing it by accident. They just don't realize they're doing it, right? And we probably have all been there. Accidentally copy a file we shouldn't have to a USB stick, accidentally attach the wrong file to an email or what have you that you're trying to send externally. And so those are the risks that and those signals and those behaviors that we really want to identify, in addition to everything else going around this wheel. And so, traditionally, when you look at those types of risks from like the insider employee perspective, there's solutions out there. There's user entity behavioral analytics solutions, there's activity monitoring, even DLP from a data loss prevention perspective. But they all have kind of their pros and cons, and they don't necessarily give you the visibility into insider risks. And you can kind of see that here in this table. They can be extremely complex to set up, right? And sometimes these solutions use machine learning, so you have to build a profile on the user, and that could take 30 days or a month or however long. But also, it doesn't give you all of the visibility. There might be gaps, and they don't necessarily integrate with each other either, especially if I have multiple vendors in there. And so that's where we almost have to kind of change our mindset a little bit around, okay, how do we, if I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice and then I give HR notice, how do we then build a profile on me, on Matt Soseman, to say, Matt, we're going to monitor all of your activity just to trust but verify, and just to make sure that you're not necessarily going to take any data with you, right? Or it could be the other way around. We're constantly monitoring Matt just to understand, is he accidentally sharing data he maybe shouldn't have externally or put on USB drive or whatever. So we have to be able to bring all of these signals together, and unfortunately, it's hard to do that with multiple solutions. And Joe, if you go to the next slide, that's where insider risk management, and that's a Microsoft 365 capability, that's where that comes in. This is pretty cool. Give you a little bit of history on this. This actually came out of Microsoft's own IT department internally a few years ago. And so this was built first and foremost for internal Microsoft. And then we took it to market as a product just about 1.5 years to 2 years ago. And this thing is really cool. And so it's pulling together signals from across Microsoft 365 and signals from your endpoints. And Joe and TJ will talk a little bit more about the inner workings of that later on, but it's pulling together these signals, and it's allowing you kind of a dashboard view here to see, okay, what is that employee doing? And here on the right side, you could see, they submitted their 2 weeks notice, so to speak. And then the system noticed that a massive amount of files, we have over 4,000 files here, were tried to copy to a USB drive. Obviously, that's not normal, especially after you have this HR event that was set. And so this is looking at things like USB drive transfer, printing, copy and pasting, a mass download. It could even be a mass upload of something, right? If we see that they're trying to do a mass upload of data to a Dropbox, a personal Dropbox instance, this would start to notice that. And so what that allows you to do is then go out and create almost like an incident management case and work with your e-discovery teams and work with other teams across IT to then investigate this and then put the correct policies in place and the stopping behaviors in place to then prevent that data from going outside the organization. So really cool stuff. So I'm going to turn over to TJ and Joe to take you through it.
We're going to go right into the console and take a look at what does insider risk look like to you in the compliance side when you're investigating this. So when you come into insider risk management, we're going to have a dashboard here at the top that helps you understand, what should I prioritize right now? There's only medium and low alerts to review. Previously, there were high risk ones, and then that'll give you an indicator of where to focus. Alerts transition to cases. So when an analyst has gone in and reviewed alerts, they can either promote this to an actual case to investigate or dismiss that case. And then users. Users are ranked by their risk level, and that's based on activity that, as Matt said, accessing USB, uploading data to a third-party cloud, altering sensitivity and protection on content, or maybe setting up a forwarding rule in their Outlook so that content can be sent to an external address. All of those play into this risk score level. You'll also notice in my demo environment, we've anonymized all the account names. Of course, once this gets to a case, the analyst actually investigating the case is going to be able to translate this back to which employee this is. But the idea here is at this point, we want an analyst looking into this to be objective and not have some personal bias based on the name that they're seeing or who they are in the organization. That it should really be based on the activities. And then once we find the activities to be something worth warranted, we'll get into it. The way that insider risk management is validating signal is based on policies. So you tune the system with these policies to prioritize what type of content. Maybe it's based on sensitivity label, maybe it's on location of that data, so that the system knows the breadth of where to go and what to prioritize as activity. And this really goes a long way in ensuring that we have true positives around activity that's being reported. So that's everything already just on the overview. Let's dig into alerts. From here, this is the culmination of activity that we're seeing across individual users, and giving you a timeline about how your environment is faring from the number of activities or alerts. And then as we scroll down, we can go in and see individual alerts that need to be reviewed, are confirmed and have a case associated with them, or if they've been resolved. And we'll come back to this in a second. As I mentioned, alerts get promoted up to cases. Just like we saw on the alerts, we give you a historic timeline about activity in your environment. And then as we come down and look at existing cases, we can see how long the case has been opened, users associated with this, and whether it's active or closed. Our filter right now is for active. And then just quickly, I mentioned that the system is tuned by you configuring policies based on confidential data, confidentiality obligation during departure is when somebody has turned in their termination that they're going to resign. So we have a policy around that so that we can look at historic and future data in relation to insider risk. And then we have anti-harassment and security policies. I mentioned this a little bit before. We do have the ability to take a look at which users in our environment are of a high risk, and we sort that based on the high level of high, medium, and low. And then inside the tool, when you are actually interfacing with employees, there are some canned templates that you can then customize and send out to employees, reminding them of their obligations, just to try and curb behavior. Maybe somebody did something accidentally. We don't want to make that assumption. So these can be reviewed by your HR department and legal department to make sure you're not overstating something or misrepresenting something to the employee. So let's dig in. We'll take a look at what would an analyst need to look at this from a day-to-day basis. I can click on alert. From here, I get a mini dashboard about what this user has been doing. I can see 428 files to USB, downloads from SharePoint, and shared externally is really the high level of content here. As we move down, we can see the duration of which the data was detected. In this case, we've already opened a case and associated this with potential IP theft. And what are we using for that? Or as an analyst, what am I doing? Is I'm looking at if I've leveraged Microsoft Information Protection and created labels that my company uses and marks content with. That gets surfaced here, so we can see that there's highly confidential documents and specifically documents around hardware vNext, which is probably an R&D based project. We're also able to bring in those sensitive information types that Microsoft leverages and allows you as a customer to define. And you've already been using these sensitive information types probably in your DLP policies or maybe in some of your labeling policies for content inside of your information. Now, we also want to surface what SharePoint sites, labels, as far as sensitivity there, and recipients. So in this case, we can start to see who actually received a lot of this content. And from a risk perspective, we can see that, this wasn't internal efforts. So that would have stayed in Contoso or Microsoft. We're seeing that this is specifically going out to Outlook. From here, the analyst will make a high-level determination of whether to confirm this and move this into a case or dismiss this alert. So one of the neat parts about the case is now that we've determined that this is something we want to look into, we can see historically again how are we handling cases, how many active versus closed. But come into case 893, we see potential IP theft. The part I really like is this histogram that happens where we start to see not only the activities and alerts that were happening over time. So we scroll down to the bottom here, we'll see the stuff that happened at the beginning. And this is usually where we will see termination, HR activity, and then activity around data exfiltration start to happen. But this also puts it in a picture form. So I can start to see as over time, the risk score wasn't that high. And then we see it pop up here. And so that tells me I should hover over this and focus on activities around May 28th. to look into, because that's when the system is really telling me something started to look anomalous. So in addition, we can use this as a small, case management system, keeping notes, adding contributors, giving you the ability to keep everything inside of this tool so that you're not necessarily having to share around OneNotes or emails around sensitive activity.
No, thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share kind of a real world scenario of how Patriot recently used insider risk management. So, like all companies, we have confidentiality policies and we implement, trust but verify. So we were actually very curious to use this product and actually on a recent exit. Just to see, was there actually any, data left suddenly, when this person exited? What was really interesting, I read some recent stats, guys, where like 60% of people in consulting admit to taking, documents or data, with them when they leave. So it actually happens more than you would probably want if you were in professional services, right? So this is something that I recently learned and how to use this tool. And the first thing before I could really get started with this tool is I needed to actually go and get a license for insider risk management. And what I needed to do is assign a license to me as the administrator to use the tool. And then I needed to assign a license to the person that I was investigating. And that's kind of the minimum requirement to get started. But if you want to use the alerting capability, for example, if you want it to proactively reach out and let you know when there are issues, this would actually need to be applied to as many people as you have, concerns with, people in high risk roles, for example. So kind of keep that in mind that you could do it on a one-off, but if you really want to get the, if you want to be alerted when, as Matt mentioned, there could be just accidental information sharing going on, and if you need to investigate and respond to that, right? So I want to kind of take you through this. Now, what's really great about the tool is it implements anonymization. So I think that removes bias for the investigator, right, when you first start digging into the tool. So when I click on users as an example, the usernames are all anonymized here. And you can see I have this high-risk user to investigate. And when I click on this high-risk user, it says that there is activity going on here to investigate. But when I go over to user activity, what's really, really helpful here is it says that there's 200 total activities, but there's 15 unusual activities. And so I can just very quickly within just a few clicks, see here that there was a highly unusual amount of deletion going on. And this occurred right around the employee exit date, 412% higher deletion than normal. And that was deleted from a Windows 10 machine, so local deletion. There was also a high amount of data exfiltration from SharePoint, 400% above normal downloads from 23 separate SharePoint sites. And some of that contained, what could have been sensitive information. And, DLP and sensitive information types are not perfect, but, certainly something to investigate. The other interesting thing is that there was also exfiltration to USB, a much higher percentage than normal, including items that were marked as internal by Microsoft information protection. So this was really helpful just to have a quick discussion with that employee about these activities and to remind them of their obligations to contracts that they signed about confidentiality, of course, right? So you can imagine that was an interesting conversation. Probably not appropriate for a webinar, though. But so the other thing I wanted to mention, TJ really kind of called out that when you get into the cases and you click on a particular case here, there is a really useful user activity report. And this user activity report allows you to see here the very quickly identify anomalous activity, high risk activity. This is that USB copy that was discovered as an example. So again, I just wanted to share, it's one thing to kind of look in a demo environment. It's another thing to actually use this in a real world scenario. And so I can just, tell you just from my own experience, this tool really was easy to use. It was easy for me to set up and deploy, and I was able to, help protect information. So the story actually did have a good ending. Had a conversation with the employee, reminded them that, hey, we are a Microsoft partner, we do use this, and there was a good chuckle, and they agreed to delete the information they had exfiltrated. So, anyway, the other thing I did want to mention that you could actually use role-based access control to delegate these insider risk roles to members of your HR team if you wanted to empower them to do these investigations themselves, so you don't have to have them go through IT. If you contact me at Patriot, I'm happy to share this slide deck with you, which includes additional information for you guys to be able to access these resources. But Patriot would love to have a conversation with you just to make sure that you're taking maximum advantage of all of your Microsoft licensing. We have a complimentary deployment planning workshop where we can actually go through all of your Microsoft licenses and just help make sure that you're taking advantage of everything. And if you need partner assistance, we're more than happy to help you with those deployments. In many cases, there's Microsoft funding available that we can seek out to see if we can actually offset our costs as well. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank you, Matt and TJ, for joining. If there are any questions, I'll be hanging out here in the chat room for a little bit. But thank you all again for joining today's webinar on Insider Risk Management.